news comes first. This is ABC 7 Extra.
Welcome to ABC 7 Extra. Good evening, I'm Stephanie Valle. For the next half hour, we are talking about something that a lot of people don't like talking about in the open: violent relationships. February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. According to a database compiled by the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1.5 million high school students are targets of dating violence each year. Nearly 1 in 3 girls in the U.S. is a target, and the highest rate of dating violence occurs in females between the ages of 16 and 24. Tonight, I want to profile one horrendous case of dating violence. A young mother was murdered by her boyfriend, who was the father of her 3 little girls. I have extra perspective from the oldest daughter of Mary Corral and Richard Flores, who is opening up for the first time about what happened to her mom nearly 20 years ago. It's also the latest episode of the Borderline Crimes podcast. The body of 20-year-old Mary Corral was found the morning of April 29, 2005, in the home where her boyfriend, 19-year-old Richard Flores, lived with his mother. Her body was wrapped in a sheet and garbage bags left in Richard's bedroom closet.
And so I moved some blankets around, and that was a big bag, so I pulled the bag. It was real heavy. And when I grabbed the bag real good, I felt a foot, some toes.
The forensic examination showed that Mary had been beaten and strangled. She was bound and gagged with duct tape. She had bite marks on her nose. There was a cut to her underarm, but the medical examiner determined it happened after she died, indicating an attempt at dismemberment. Flores was the prime murder suspect, but he was nowhere to be found. They had 3 little girls together, and now they had no mom. The deadly end to a violent relationship was a shock to her family and friends, but sadly, it wasn't a surprise, not even to the neighbors who spoke to KVIA.
You know, we knew that they had problems. Everybody knew they had problems. It's just people don't want to talk to people. The people don't want to talk because they don't want any problems.
There were police reports. There were other offenses that had been investigated. But she, over time, as many victims of domestic violence do, they make hard choices about staying with the one that they love, the father of their child, not having other options, a variety of things. Flores had fled to Juarez and was arrested and extradited to El Paso in March 2006. He told detectives during an interview at police headquarters he'd only intended to beat her up that night.
We were wasted, and that's when I told them, when she gets here, we're gonna do what we're gonna do. You don't do anything. You just stay inside the closet, and we're going to scare her.
Richard Flores told police Mary Corral had shown up here at his house much later than he thought she would. April 28th was his birthday, and he was throwing himself a house party. But late that night, he said he and 2 of his friends suffocated Mary, beat her, and strangled her with an extension cord.
What a big present, man. And the 2 of them were saying, "Happy birthday, there's your present."
Happy birthday, homeboy. Okay.
After admitting everything to police, Flores said this.
Let me ask a quick question. How many years do you think they'll give me for pulling the cord? You know my story. How much would you give me?
He was convicted of murder and sentenced to 99 years in prison in August 2007. Now, their oldest daughter, Devon Corral, is talking to me about her mom and what she remembers about her.
Like a little girl, you just want to make sense of why your mom's not there anymore.
She wasn't even 3 years old when Mary was killed.
I do remember going to my mom's funeral, but I didn't know who was inside of the casket.
Devon has a message for anyone in a relationship that turns violent.
You know, I want my mom's story to be still known to this day, because it's this is very common. I don't think people know how common it is. I feel like if they knew what really goes on behind other closed doors, where some people don't make it, they would leave.
And in this episode of Borderline Crimes, the urgent message Devon Corral is delivering in hopes of saving someone from a violent relationship. You don't want to miss that emotional podcast called I Want My Mother's Story Known, The Murder of Mary Corral. Listen to the full story wherever you get your podcasts now or on kvia.com. And joining me now to talk about this case and teen dating violence in the borderland in general are Aaron Setliff, who you may recognize from that report on Mary Corral's case. Setliff is a former prosecutor here in El Paso and is now the trial team chief for the El Paso County Attorney's Office of Protective Orders Unit. And Sandra Garcia is the executive director of the Center Against Sexual and Family Violence. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
So let's talk more about Mary's case. And Aaron, I would like to start with you. You told me during our interview, and it's something I expand upon in the podcast, that Mary and Richard had a history of violence. So can you talk about the patterns that they fell into and how common that is?
Well, first of all, I want to tell you thank you for covering the case in such a careful and thoughtful way. This is a hard story to this day. It affects me, and I was just one of the prosecutors that handled the case. But, when I looked at the case way back then, we knew of previous assaults that the defendant had perpetrated on Mary. He had chased her with scissors one time and had been charged as an aggravated assault, went to felony court, and was downgraded to a misdemeanor. In part because Mary wasn't ready and able to participate in the prosecution. I didn't handle the case, but I think that's probably what happened. So he was put on probation for a while for assault family violence. And then after that, he finished his probation. I think he again was involved in assaulting Mary. She ran into a convenience store right off Dale Road where the murder happened, and a clerk actually saw her and saw what Richard did to her on that day. The case was pending when she was murdered. That's a hard thing to see. That's a hard reality. I think we would have been able to go forward on that case, but what he did intervened in the meantime. The other thing that he had been charged with was intoxication manslaughter. He'd been out driving late at night and had been involved in an accident where he killed another person. Mm-hmm. So he's out on bond on both of those offenses when he committed this offense. You asked, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. But we were talking about just like how common this is. I mean, you said in the podcast that, this is not the first instance. You don't end with someone dying. It starts much sooner than that. And I want to bring you into this, Sandra, too, just that this is very common for these patterns, this cycle to continue until sometimes it ends in someone's death.
Correct. I mean, unfortunately, I think when people ask, why do they stay, but there's been multiple incidents, we talk about it takes 7 to 10 times, right, for a victim to leave their aggressor. And so when you think of that, it's hard for individuals to comprehend that, because I think they feel that outsiders looking in, I would never put myself in that situation, or I would immediately leave, or I would, I wouldn't stand for that. And I think what people often forget is that these are good faith relationships. This is an individual that you care about, you have children with. I often say, we talk about how relationships are challenging in their work, but we don't talk about what that work is. And so depending on what you grew up with, what you were around, what role models were kind of exhibiting, we sometimes will justify certain behaviors, right? So my partner isn't, my dad was really abusive, but my partner doesn't leave me bruises. Or my partner is just really controlling, but it's because he cares. And then oftentimes again, you hang on to those moments where there is not abuse, where they are treating you well. Where they are being parents to the children, right? And so you want to expand those opportunities, and then you start to minimize the others. And so that's where we get to the point where, unfortunately, these incidents will escalate because they'll start to compound.
That's something interesting that you brought up, because in the police interview, he told the detectives that he would buy her anything she wanted and that he loved her. So in his mind, I guess he thought that he was caring for her, and she probably felt the same at certain points. So,
well, and Stephanie, can I just say briefly, he threatened all of her family. So there's the money aspect, there's the love aspect, but she was also scared for her brother and her 2 kids and her mom because he had directly threatened them on multiple occasions.
It's terrible. And Aaron, you mentioned in the podcast that there was something that Richard Flores said during his police interview that stuck with you when he asked the detectives how much time in prison he thought that he would get after they heard his story. Talk about why that struck you.
So, you know, we're in court. We make arguments all the time, but reading his confession and listening to his confession really helped explain his point of view and his own words, where after he told this difficult story about the mother of his children and about what he had done to her, and I mean, you heard the podcast, the facts were so egregious. And at the end, not, you know, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I did this. I will forever be sorry for what I did. No, it was, well, how many years do you think I'm going to get for this? What do you think? And so that struck me, and it was a great question actually for the jury. And I asked the jury probably 15 times in my closing argument, how many years going through the facts of the case and what he did?
They ended up giving him 99 years, which was the maximum they could do with a murder charge. So it was a pretty effective question that he got an answer to. Mm-hmm. Well, if you or someone you know needs help, we want you to call the Center for Sexual and Family Violence at 915-593-7300. And still ahead, the resources available in our area and what needs to be done to curb domestic and dating violence. You're watching ABC 7 Extra.
Fargo is the new virtual assistant from Wells Fargo.
Oh, come on.
Fargo lets you do this.
Fargo, turn off my debit card. I found it. I found my card.
And also this.
Fargo, turn on my debit card.
Do you, Fargo? You can with Wells Fargo.
One way to prevent diabetes is by knowing its risk factors. Factors like having a relative with diabetes. If you had diabetes while pregnant. Or if you're overweight, diabetes could be sneaking up on you. Even if you think you're not at risk, visit diabetesnowwhat.org and take a quick, confidential, and free diabetes risk test to help spot diabetes before it starts, for you or a loved one.
Preparing for a road trip takes a lot of planning to make sure you reach your destination. Dodds Wealth Management Group is your local financial planning firm. We are fiduciaries and obligated to act in our clients' best interest. No one knows what life changes will come, so let us help you be ready when they do. Dodds Wealth Management Group, creating, building, and preserving wealth.
The Sun Bowl cars are back at Oscar Leaser's Hyundai of El Paso, and they're available direct to you for a limited time. Sun Bowl Elantras and Sonatas, Tucsons and Santa Fe's, even Palisades, fully stocked and fully equipped. All available with zero cash out of pocket. Interest rates as low as 0% APR, and payments as low as $289 a month on Sun Bowl Sonatas. And Oscar Leaser's Hyundai of El Paso is fully stocked today. The cars, crossovers, SUVs, and electric vehicles you want. The Sun Bowl cars are back at Oscar Leaser's Hyundai of El Paso.
Fargo, the new virtual assistant from Wells Fargo, gives you information you need quickly.
But if you don't have your account info for direct deposit, you all gotta come back tomorrow.
Fargo, what's my checking account routing number?
Be like her.
Do you, Fargo? You can with Wells Fargo.
Welcome back to ABC 7 Extra. I'm Stephanie Valle, and tonight we are talking about dating and domestic violence. February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. Back with me are Aaron Sutliff, a former prosecutor here in El Paso and the trial team chief for El Paso County Attorney's Office Protective Orders Unit, and Sandra Garcia, the executive director of the Center Against Sexual and Family Violence. Thank you again both for being here. So let's talk about the overarching problem of domestic violence. This discussion this half hour all started with the case involving the murder of Maria Corral in 2005 by her boyfriend. I spoke to their daughter, Devon Corral. This was the message she hoped people would take from her mom's murder.
I need people to understand that love is, someone that loves you is never gonna hurt you physically or emotional. I just want girls to know, like, they could really do it on their own. It's a baby will never stop you. That should be your biggest motivation to leave. And that should be your motivation to work harder for the things that you want.
And that was something that Sandra, she told me she wished her mom knew that in her heart, because she just wanted her, you know, in her life as an adult. And again, your center sees so many people who need to hear that message. So tell us about the center and the services that you provide, Sandra.
So obviously we do have an emergency shelter that provides emergency services 24 hours a day, both for clients who are fleeing domestic violence, those that are also seeking sexual assault services. We go to the hospital for hospital accompaniment. And so one of the things that we tend to say, and it strikes me by her comment, is, you know, the question I ask is, you know, how do these ladies do it, right? And there's men and women, but primarily there's still a lot of females. And so some of the strongest, I mean, I can tell you, I've been there since 2000, and some of the strongest individuals that I have ever met in my entire life have been these survivors of domestic violence. Despite their obstacles, despite the challenges, despite what's in front of them, once you make that step, they are resilient. They will move forward, ensure that their kids are fed, find jobs at whatever level that they're at. And so part of that is also attributed to not only their motivation, but I think coupled with the services that the center provides. They're coupled up with an advocate, which essentially is a caseworker that works with them in terms of support groups, case management, resources like the county attorney's office. We work closely with the district attorney as well to make sure that they're updated and informed about their cases, because we know this is going to be a longer term goal, right, if they have something pending in the judicial system. But the main thing for us is always to ensure that those survivors know that they are not at fault. So regardless of what led up to it, what was going on, what was the environment, people do not choose to be abused. And so I think that the more that we can get that out to the public of, you know, why or how come, it's a lot of complex issues that happen within relationships. And so making sure that individuals and us as a community also know that. And so I think oftentimes as family members, we want to be supportive, but you have to be careful how we teeter, right? Because I think sometimes in our wanting to be supportive, we might interject what we think should have happened, or I've done this, or I've done that. And so I think the biggest thing you can do is listen with an empathetic ear. Make sure you connect them to services similar to the ones like ours, where there's various programs across Texas. Obviously, we're the ones that are here locally. So we are your local rape crisis center and your local domestic violence program that provides services to Hudspeth, Culberson, and El Paso counties. And so once we're able to do that, then we're able to kind of connect them to the services in our community. Because I often say it takes a village. We're the experts on domestic violence and the content. We'll ensure they get support groups, therapy, different case management that helps them. But then we rely on greater partners like the county attorney's office, the district attorney's office, the police department. And so we ensure that these relationships are developed with these entities, because we know that that's the funnel that they come into us through, or that we need to project back out to.
So Sandra, what do you tell people who feel like maybe their experience doesn't warrant the action of seeking outside help? You touched on it earlier, just like the status quo, or their standards of what abuse is may be very different than what abuse actually is. And we did show the graphics, but if we could just run through those again, just what do you tell people?
So I think that one of the main things is that, so there's a power and control wheel. You can look this up, of anyone can Google this. And so a power control wheel has these tactics within it, right? They're all verbal and emotional tactics if you look at them. And so we handle everything from verbal emotional tactics all the way up to obviously physical, sexual abuse. When someone says, well, it's because I don't have a bruise, or I don't, there wasn't a threat, he's not threatening my life, that's why we handle a much wider range of victimization tactics, if you will. Because we know that if these tactics are existing, even on what you might identify as a superficial level, in terms like, well, you know, sometimes he is humiliating, he is rude to me in public. Just the fact that it's happening in public elevates it to a different level. So even though it's not physical, to us, that's intuitive that something is going to continue to progress, because now they don't even care that they're doing it in public. And so when you have individuals that aren't sure, I think that at the moment you're questioning it, that's your intuition telling you you need to seek some help. And so a lot of times I think we second guess ourselves, especially as women. But your intuition's telling you something, and so reach out. We are never going to tell you, oh, that's not enough abuse, go ahead and call us back later. Absolutely not. If you're calling us, there's a reason you're calling us, and we're going to be there to assist you.
Erin, you work with protective orders. How do people get a protective order, and can we put that full screen up with the QR code?
So that's a great approach, is having that, taking a picture of that QR code that'll link you directly up to an application that's online where you can tell us your information. We can kind of check on some things, and then someone from our office will get back to you quickly and hear about what has happened to you. Not everyone who applies gets a protective order. We take this application and we determine whether we're going to be able to represent you. We handle about 90% or so of all the protective orders in El Paso County. And then we'll file a lawsuit, basically, and go to court and fight for you. If there's some occasions when people that need help aren't necessarily going to be able to qualify for a protective order. So I want people to have a real expectation, but certainly we're very interested and happy to hear from people all the time that are seeking protective orders.
And real quickly, you don't need to have a parent to help you get one, even if, say, you're a minor.
Wow, you've been doing your homework, exactly. I was a lobbyist for a while. So after I was a prosecutor, I went to Austin and was a lobbyist on the issue of domestic violence for a while. And that was actually one of the things that we changed over there, is before you always had to have a parent. And sometimes kids don't want to tell their parents, frankly. And so it is possible for a minor to apply for a protective order. We'll review the case and we'll decide whether it fits. But yeah, definitely any age person can file for a protective order.
And real quickly, how many minors have filed for protective orders in El Paso County, and what is the trend right now?
So it's fair to say that we got 112 protective orders on behalf of minors last year. I think the graphic that you're showing shows that that's slightly less than last year. But that also includes, I don't want to misrepresent, also includes parents who have hurt their children. Children can get protective orders from parents, and then also sometimes sexual assault. So it's not necessarily always dating, but a good fair portion of those include dating violence situations. It's worth saying, though, that in speaking with teens don't really understand themselves as dating, and so it's been a real life lesson, and we're within the movement for us all to kind of learn how do we talk with young people in a way that they can understand and that they care about. Because if we're saying you're going out on dates, they're like, no, we're just talking, and talking may mean something else. And so giving them the freedom and listening to what they're telling us is super important. Just like you were listening to Devon for her experience as a child victim, I think that is really where it's at for us in the movement, is to listen to victims, teens, older people, all around, and hear what they need rather than us decide what they need for them.
You're watching ABC 7 Extra, and still ahead, we're going to look at the sterling numbers of people who've died due to domestic violence and talk about how to prevent it.
Getting a medical imaging exam like an ultrasound, MRI, or X-ray doesn't have to take hours. Desert Imaging provides a fast, friendly, and convenient experience. With 5 locations across El Paso, we'll get you in and out with peace of mind. Choose Desert Imaging, because the sooner you know, the better.
Amigos from near and far, leap into the excitement at the inaugural Leap Year Festival in Anthony, Texas, the leap year capital of the world. Join us on Friday, March the 1st and Saturday, March the 2nd for 2 days of non-stop Buddha party. Tickets on sale now at theleapyearfestival.com.
It's the Borderland Pilot of the Century. Fun for the kids, live music featuring Sonora Scandalo on Friday and La Original Sonora y Explosiva Dinamita on Saturday. Get down on the best border grub and catch the thrill of Lucha League. Get your tickets today at leapyearfestival.com.
The highest art is beautiful, timeless, inspired by the divine. Shenyun. The Plaza Theater, February 24th. Shenyun.com/El Paso.
If you have foot pain, it's not normal, and you need to do something about it.
The Good Feet Arch Support System can not only alleviate, but also eliminate the pain from plantar fasciitis, neuromas, and bunions.
In addition to just providing pain relief, better balance, better stability, better function.
The wonderful thing about the Good Feet Arch Support System is it gives you a pep in your step. You walk with confidence. Your posture is better, you're well aligned, you're ready to take the day on.
Our feet are the unsung heroes of our day, carrying us through every step of our lives. But when they hurt, our world seems to come to a screeching halt. At the Foot Institute, our doctors have the knowledge to help. And with our advanced technology, we'll get you back to where you belong. Start living and doing what you love to do. Come and see why so many people are referred to us. The Foot Institute, where technology meets experience. Now with a brand new location. Se habla español.
Welcome back to ABC 7 Extra. I'm Stephanie Valle. We're talking about dating and domestic violence. Back with me are Aaron Setliff, a former prosecutor, now with the County Attorney's Office Protective Orders Unit, and Sandra Garcia, the Executive Director of the Center Against Sexual and Family Violence. I want to put this bar graph on the screen for our viewers. This is from the Texas Council on Family Violence, the breakdown of victims of domestic violence in Texas from 2022. Obviously, I would like to hear from both of you. How do we end domestic violence? How do we prevent these bar graphs from continuing to grow? And Aaron, I'd like to start with you.
Thanks, Stephanie. So I have some thoughts. So the importance of safety for victims, we cannot put that in second place anytime. So safety, number one, that is a way to end domestic violence, but also accountability for offenders. Accountability means that they have to maybe go into criminal court and be accountable for what they did, but it's also being a respondent of a protective order and also taking responsibility for the things that they've done. I also think that we can't forget about prevention. I may be stealing some of Sandra's answers, but prevention is stepping back and really looking at what makes men think that violence is an option in an intimate partner relationship and help women develop healthy femininity. So those three steps, I think, would get us so far in addressing the problem that we have with domestic violence.
And Sandra, the same to you?
I would agree. I think that the accountability for those individuals who are perpetrating the violence, education is huge. So programs like BIBS, like Battery Intervention Prevention programs that teach accountability, it's not anger management. And then first and foremost, like you said, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of safety for those individuals, to know that they can go somewhere and be safe with their children, that's confidential, that takes care of all their basic needs, so that it's easier for them to make those choices is huge. It's huge.
And before we go, I want to put up the information again on the screen for how people can file protective orders here in El Paso County. And we also have the information for the Center Against Sexual and Family Violence, if we could put those that information up on the screen. Again, just and like you said, Aaron, not everybody gets a protective order, but at least there is a process where there can be a screening process for this.
Yeah, definitely.
And also, again, the Centers Against Sexual and Family Violence, there is a 24-hour crisis help line. The number there on your screen, 915-593-7300, and the website casfv.org. There's even a function on the website where if you are at your home and the person that you are living with walks in, you can do a quick close and it clears it from your browser. It's just a really important function to have if you feel like you want to investigate this without anyone really knowing, which is unfortunate because this is something we should be talking about. Well, Aaron and Sandra, thank you both so much for your time today.
Thank you.
And to you.
I'm Stephanie Valle. This has been ABC 7 Extra.
Thank you for watching. ABC 7 News is now available on any of these streaming services, as well as the KVIA News and KVIA Weather and Traffic apps.